When you think of farm-fresh and locally sourced meats, it brings to mind images of the highest quality meals. However, in the case of the Pickton farms, the local source was the shady streets of the downtown Eastside of Vancouver, and the meats were that of the women that Robert Pickton found there. Tonight we will discuss the crimes of Robert Willie Pickton, as well as how the staunch denial of police allowed the pig farm killer to hunt freely for over a decade and become one of the most prolific killers in Canadian history. Let's open the serial killer file. This episode of Seriously Strange is brought to you in part by Raid: Shadow Legends, an epic mobile game that's loads of fun. Get ready to get real, raw, dark, epic, and awesome as Raid: Shadow Legends takes you to a world of dark fantasy and realism. As I'm sure you know, tons of mobile games out there are cutesy or look kind of lame, honestly. Well, you don't need to worry about that with Raid: Shadow Legends. It's a brand new collection RPG with incredible graphics, an impressive storyline, and a ton of fun to keep you interested. More mobile games need to be like Raid. Then the world would be a better place, like the developers actually give a crap. Nearly 10 million players worldwide have already downloaded it in the past 3 months alone. And look at these ratings. It's insane. And the best part is that it's totally free. In Raid: Shadow Legends, you can collect over 400 unique champions, which include badass characters like orcs, undead, knights, elves, and more. You can assemble a team and start fighting legendary battles against all sorts of enemies or other players, and you can take full advantage of a professional, fully voiced story campaign. No more of the same old mobile games that never push the envelope of potential. Raid: Shadow Legends is loads of fun, and it's beautifully made. There's something in this game for everyone. For me, it's boss battles and collecting characters. I'm always pumped to see how wicked they're gonna look, and the skills that they're gonna have, and the damage they're gonna do! I could play this game for 5 minutes or 5 hours, which is way better than I am with women. So join me and start playing today. Head down into the description below, hit the special links, and you'll get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program, available to my audience, courtesy of Raid. Again, hit those links in the description below, check out Raid: Shadow Legends, because it really is an awesome game, and just playing their game supports my channel, so why the hell not? Alright, thanks for listening, and now, on to the episode. In March of 1997, Willie Pickton was on the prowl, in a deep desire for sex. He drove into Vancouver in search of a companion for the evening and found Wendy Lin Ellingson, a prostitute with a history of drug abuse. Willie had a proposition for her, a typical one, money for sex back at his farm, and she agreed to accompany Willie back. Things went as one would expect. After their business had concluded, Wendy asked to use the phone to call her then-boyfriend. While she was looking up the number in a phone book, Willie came up behind her and slapped a handcuff onto her wrist. Wendy immediately panicked. This was far from normal. A feeling of dread washed over her as she launched into survival mode, knowing that her life was in immediate danger. She kicked and bit, anything to keep Willie at bay, and backed into the kitchen. She grabbed a large butcher's knife she had seen on the table and began slashing out at her attacker. They fought over the knife, each getting stabbed in the process. Pickton bled profusely from a wound, so much so that he fainted from blood loss, which gave Wendy enough time to run from the trailer. Willie had stabbed Wendy multiple times, however. One particular stab went so deep that it punctured her lung, and she had been cut open to the point that she was partially disemboweled. Despite all of this, Wendy's strength and fear drove her to keep going, and she ran into the street and waved down a passing vehicle. The car stopped, and the concerned couple believed Wendy's story despite her still clinging to the bloody knife. An ambulance was called and brought her to the hospital. Wendy was admitted to the Royal Columbian Hospital. Pickton managed to regain consciousness and, despite his own wounds, drove himself to the same hospital later that night. An orderly found a key in Willie's pocket and found that it fit the handcuff that had still been locked on Wendy's left wrist. This should have been the key that put an end to Pickton's dark desires. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigated, and Pickton was charged with 4 offenses, including attempted murder. Luck, however, was on Willie's side. Wendy was too terrified to face him in court, and prosecutors considered a conviction was unlikely because she was a drug user and therefore unreliable. At the trial, Wendy did not show, and the charges against Pickton were not pursued. Perhaps if the case had gone to trial, many lives would have been spared, because the clothes and rubber boots Willie was wearing that night, which had been taken by police, languished in a storage locker for 7 years. The DNA of 2 missing women was settled on these items. The police had no idea the grave error they had made when they let the monster that was Robert Pickton go free. Robert William Pickton was the second of 3 children born to Leonard and Helen Louise Pickton on October 24, 1949. Leonard was considered lazy and unambitious by most who knew him, and as such, Louise was the more stern and hands-on of the 2 parents. Life on the farm was hard for the Pickton children. They worked with the livestock for 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, only going to school for 2 days out of the week. The living conditions were appalling, and so was their hygiene. Louise would allow the animals free run, even letting them within the house, caring very little for the mess they would leave behind. The state of the farm was so bad that when Willie's older sister Linda was 12, she moved away to be raised by extended family and cut off contact with her parents and siblings. Due to their lack of hygiene, the Picktons had an odor that became infamous among the children's classmates, and Willie was bullied terribly for it, often being called Piggy by his peers. Friendless, Willie spent much of his time in isolation. Even on the farm, he preferred to spend time with the animals. One of the more disturbing rumors that circulated, however, around Willie's childhood was that he would open up the carcasses of large slaughtered hogs and climb inside of them to hide among the blood and meat. He felt safer in there than out amongst people. When he was about 12 years old, Willie spent some of his money at an auction to buy himself a baby calf. He immediately felt connected to his pet and intended to keep it for its entire life, raising it with love and compassion. However, things were going to take a dark turn. One day when he came home from school, he found his calf missing from its pen. He searched frantically for his beloved pet. Upon seeing his son distressed, his father Leonard told him to check the barn. Young Willie sped down to the barn only to open the doors to see his calf lifeless, hanging by the ankle and already hollowed out, prepared for butchering. Willie was inconsolable, refused to talk to anyone for 4 days, and Leonard only made matters worse by suggesting that Willie might feel better if he ate some of his pet. When remarking on the incident later in life, Pickton said, "That really upset me, but that happens. That's life. I mean, we're only here for so long. When your time is over, your time is over." The harsh cruelty that his parents showed him by butchering his pet instilled in Willie from a young age that caring for anything deeply had painful consequences. Never the brightest of students, Pickton dropped out of school at 15 and at the urging of his mother began to shadow a local butcher. Having since moved to a large 40-acre farm in Port Coquitlam, about an hour outside of Vancouver, the Picktons began raising pigs almost exclusively, and it became Willie's job to slaughter them, prepare the meat, and store it for sale in large freezers on the farm. No one had any idea just how twisted Willie's mind had become, and how disturbing he would become in just a few short years. On the evening of October 16, 1967, Willie's younger brother Dave took the family pickup out for a drive. He was only 16 and was enjoying the newly found freedom having a license brought him. At some point during the joyride, Dave came across one of the neighborhood boys, 14-year-old Tim Barrett. No one can say exactly how it happened, but Dave slammed right into the young boy. In a panic, Dave raced home and told his parents what had happened. Louise Pickton stopped what she was doing and hurried over to the place where the accident had occurred. When she found the boy, he was badly injured but still alive. She looked him over and then began to roll and shove him into the ditch that ran alongside the road. Louise then pushed him over the edge and went home. Tim Barrett died by drowning in the water that had pooled within the ditch. After hearing about the hit and run, a local mechanic tipped off police. He remembered some suspicious damage to the front of the Picktons' pickup that Dave had been insistent on fixing. Dave was sent to juvenile court and charged with fleeing the scene of an accident, but Louise never faced any charges for her role in the crime. She treated Tim more like a wounded pig than a human being. This utter disregard for human life was a powerful lesson that would go on to greatly affect her sons. In 1978, Leonard Pickton passed away at the age of 82, and soon after, Louise was diagnosed with cancer. Willie took care of his ailing mother, feeding and cleaning up after her, but on April 1st of 1979, she died at the age of 67. Willie was grief-stricken. His mother was his role model, and he once remarked that the two of them were two peas in a pod. After the death of their parents, the Pickton brothers began to make some large changes. Dave became associated with the Hells Angels and opened a chop shop on the farm, leaving Willie to run the day-to-day tasks associated with running the farm itself. The extended periods alone gave Willie the time to indulge in some of his darker pursuits. Women began going missing in the downtown Eastside as early as the 1980s, some investigators correlating this with the death of Pickton's mother. However, officially, the first missing woman linked to Pickton wasn't until 1995. Willie was a regular visitor to the dark streets of Vancouver. Addiction and mental illness is rampant among the low-income residents of the downtown East Side, leaving many to turn to prostitution as a means to support themselves. Having no traditional vices like drugs or alcohol, prostitutes were exactly what brought Pickton into Vancouver. It's uncertain when Willie began to see sex workers, though some investigators estimate it could have been as early as 1975. As he was shy, introverted, and with his notorious lack of hygiene, Willie never had much luck with women. He did, however, cultivate a reputation among the sex workers as being an odd but respectful man, despite the fact that women who went home with Willie often were not seen again. Dave hosted large parties on the farm, and Willie's awkward demeanor notwithstanding, he was always in attendance. The Hells Angels kept a steady supply of alcohol and drugs flowing to the parties, which also brought a stream of at-risk individuals right to the Picktons' doorstep. Diana Melnick was one of the earliest alleged victims connected to the Pickton case. She was only 20 years old when she was last seen in December of 1995. Friends of the young woman had described her as warm and kind. One remarked on how she loved horses. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Melnick had been charged with 4 charges related to prostitution, though due to her history as a sex worker, little to no action was taken when she was reported missing. Diana was not alone in this injustice. For years, the cases of missing women were ignored by the Vancouver police, considered to be throwaways. Women in the low-income neighborhood were often referred to as drug-addicted prostitutes, even when there was no evidence of either. They maintained that these women led high-risk lifestyles and were likely on extended drug binges or had moved in search of new clients. In 1992, the Women's Memorial March was established when the murdered remains of a woman were found in the downtown Eastside. The event is held annually to protest the high numbers of missing and murdered women in the community. Unfortunately, this did not spur the police to action, and the number of missing women continued to increase. In the spring of 1999, an informant told the Vancouver police that a single mother and drug addict named Lin Ellingson had seen a woman's body hanging in Pickton's slaughterhouse. When questioned by police, Ellingson initially denied the story, but the denial was anything but truthful. At the time, Lin had been living and working on the farm when Pickton asked her to help him pick up a working girl. It didn't take long before they came across a woman with dark hair and high cheekbones and brought her back with them. While Pickton stayed in one room with the woman, Ellingson went to another to get high. Sometime later, Lin woke up and noticed a light on in the barn. She walked towards the building, curious as to who would be in the slaughterhouse so late at night. She pushed open the door, and there, hanging on a meat hook, was the body of the woman they had picked up earlier that night. At eye level was the woman's legs. Lin could not tear her eyes away from the painted red toenails. The corpse had no face, and on a table was blood and hair, black hair. Willie suddenly grabbed Lin by the arm, pulling her behind the door. He walked her over to the table and made her look. He kept repeating, "She was a pig, so I butchered her like a pig." Lin was terrified, sure with every fiber of her being that she was next to be hung on a meat hook, skinned and butchered like one of Willie's pigs. The man's bloodlust was insatiable. His upbringing and trauma in life had put a filter over his eyes where he saw human beings merely as livestock to be slaughtered at his discretion. And he wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And Lin, with her heart pounding in her chest, preparing to have a hook stuck in her as well, had no idea just how deep the darkness went and how much blood Pickton really had on his hands. This concludes part 1 of this serial killer file on Robert William Pickton. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay tuned for the conclusion in part 2, coming soon. Thank you for watching.